Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist of the Tuscaloosa News, joined as I always am by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com, longtime friend as well. Looking forward to this midsummer edition of Talkin Tide. You can get us on any podcasting app you prefer, including Apple Podcasts, also available to you live or recorded on YouTube or Facebook. And of course, the Twitter feed is Talkin_Tide. Jump on that handle, give us a follow, and you'll get alerts every time we drop a podcast. The Talkin Tide podcast, sponsored by Brook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, North River Dental Associates, and DraftKings as well. A little bit more on each of those fine sponsors later in the program. Travis, we kicked this thing off. I guess we've been out for a couple of weeks here on Talkin Tide. We slow down the pace a little bit in midsummer, but getting kind of near the time where we'll pick up the pace, maybe go once a week as we hit the preseason and, of course, SEC Media Days around the corner. But for this edition, figured we'd take a look at that Alabama home football schedule. Of course, the last time we convened here on Talkin Tide, we broke things down on the road side of the schedule. But good to have you back once again, Travis, and looking forward to diving into this home slate.
Yeah, a little time to sort of rest and recharge before the proverbial stuff hits the fan in earnest with those SEC Media Days. And then before you know it, we'll be into fall camp 2022. And no doubt about it, September the 3rd, the Mountain West Conference champion Utah State Aggies travel to Tuscaloosa to open that home schedule, Chase, before maybe some more anticipated matchups this time around on the road as compared to the home games, I'd say.
Yeah, no doubt. The home schedule in September is not especially appealing. It really gets fired up once October rolls around and Texas A&M comes to town. Utah State, though, a team that's up, down, up again. Of course, they had a super year in Jordan Love's last year at quarterback a couple of years back. He leaves and actually in his last year, they had started to kind of fall apart. His best year for them was the previous season, but up, down, and up again. And they did have a pretty solid season last year. I've been to Utah State, as a matter of fact. It's quite a scene up there, right up in those mountains. There's snow all around, at least at the time I went there. I'd never seen so much snow in my life. And they kind of cut it right out of a mountain with that football complex. And Alabama doesn't have to worry about those frigid temps, though, hosting in September as opposed to going on the road to a venue like that.
Yeah, it had to be a little bit of a shock, I'd say, for Blake Anderson going out there a couple of years ago as the new head coach of the Aggies at the time, going from Jonesboro, Arkansas, Chase, out to Utah and into that sort of situation. But, man, he's a good football coach. Won a couple of Sun Belt Conference titles at ASU. Now he's won an MWC there at Utah State. I think it's one meeting he's had against Alabama as head coach. That was at Arkansas State. Didn't go terribly well for the Red Wolves, as you might expect in that type of matchup with the 2018 Alabama team. So we'll see if maybe this time around he's able to keep his club a little bit more within shouting distance.
Moving along on the home schedule, Travis, my only thought on ULM, what's that Monday presser going to be like, ULM week, Nick Saban? Is he going to preempt all the questions of the 07 game, or is he just going to wait for him to come? Will he be lying in the weeds on that, or is he going to preempt it all?
You know, even though he's already exercised that demon against ULM since then, you know it's still going to be a popular question and a popular topic. And what about Terry Bowden taking another swing at the Crimson Tide? Terry Bowden, the only opposing coach on Alabama's 2022 schedule, Chase, with a winning record against Alabama. He was 3-2 in 5 games as Auburn's head coach. Now, he got the Iggy in, what was it, 98, I guess, before before Alabama and Auburn met in Birmingham. So it was brother Bill Oliver that stepped in there on an interim basis, but he was able to maintain that winning record. 3-2. You think he's told anybody that? You think he's reminded some people of that? That look, I got a winning record against Alabama. None of those games against Nick Saban, but a couple of them against a really, really, really good coach in Gene Stallings.
He won't be saying that in front of any microphones, but maybe a little bit of person-to-person reminders. Yeah.
What's the Bowden family as head coaches? Tommy took an L in 08, right?
He did.
And Bobby got Nick in 07.
Got it.
That game in Jacksonville.
Yeah, he sure did.
The game was vacated, I think, by both teams. That's how bad that 07 game in Jacksonville was. Both teams vacated it like it never happened. Yeah. So
you and I might have tailgated on the clock.
Yeah, we did a little bit. We did a little bit. We were a little out of it ourselves.
Great time that one.
Yeah, I think the Bowdens go to 1-2 against Nick Saban maybe after this one.
Yeah, no question. All right, Texas A&M, of course, the big one, Travis. We got to stop there, and we've talked about it a little bit before, but the Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban dust up in the offseason is going to drive ticket sales, interest, TV ratings, going to drive it all. But set all that aside, it could easily be the toughest game on Alabama's entire schedule and certainly on the home schedule.
Only home game in the month of October on top of everything else, because you got Arkansas on the road on the 1st, you got Tennessee on the road on the 15th. Actually, 2 home games because Mississippi State is at home. They're on the 22nd. My bad. So a couple of home games, but you talk about a home schedule for this upcoming season, depending on what Auburn's able to do in the first month even of the season. This could have very much the look by the time the Aggies roll into Tuscaloosa of being essentially a 1-game home schedule, right? I am Mississippi State. We'll see in year 3 under Mike Leach. Vanderbilt's not going to help things certainly there in September, along with ULM and Utah State. So you're expecting some no contest type situations in the month of September in Tuscaloosa. But absolutely, this is a game that we've already heard from CBS. That's their doubleheader afternoon primetime weekend. I think we all know when this game is expected to kick off based on that. And an opportunity for Jimbo to put it all together where Alabama's concerned as Texas A&M's head coach. Beat Alabama last year, but then you lost to 3 other teams in the SEC West. So yeah, he needs to parlay a win over Alabama into something that's more along championship lines.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Beat Alabama last year, but didn't sustain.
Lost to both the Mississippi schools.
Yeah. You can't do that. If you're going to beat Alabama, if you're going to get over the hump against Alabama, you got to do better elsewhere.
You got to beat Arkansas. You got to beat Ole Miss. You got to beat Mississippi State. Wasn't able to do it. You got to show up for your damn bowl game against NC State maybe while you're at it.
Mississippi State, you mentioned the Bulldogs will be coming to town as well. Austin Peay will be the annual tune-up game ahead of the Iron Bowl. Auburn comes to town. Of course, Auburn always in Tuscaloosa on those even-numbered years, Travis. And so what about Brian Harsin coming into this game? All that went on with him, and it's been kind of quiet this summer for him. He'll be asked in a week or so, certainly at SEC Media Days, about the window in the winter where he was potentially going to be ousted as Auburn's head coach. Ultimately did not happen. But you think Brian Harsin wouldn't have an extended middle digit for a couple of folks down on the plains if he were to pull an upset at the end of the season in Tuscaloosa?
Oh, wow. I'm just wondering if he's going to get to the end of the season, though, Chase. Is this going to be another interim type situation in a game against Nick Saban in Alabama once you get into November? I look at even a couple of 3-game stretch that Auburn has there, October 1st, October 8th, October the 15th, and I'm thinking by mid-October, we're going to have a pretty good idea what the deal is with Brian Harsin in terms of potentially being around for a third season. It's just tough to envision that right now, as much as anything because of the attempted coup in the offseason.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially what that was. So I got to think Brian Harsin at this point, he probably feels like he's playing with house money in a lot of ways. Nobody's expecting Brian Harsin at this point to be around for year 3. And if Auburn doesn't want him to be around for year 3, he's going to get a pretty nice check.
No, and the Auburn administration looks conceivably could come out of this season looking worse than Harsin.
Yes.
It could go either way. You're right. Maybe it is an interim situation. Maybe they do get to the end of the season and he's even more of a lame duck than he appears to be at the moment. The flip side of it is if he manages to rally and win some games he's not supposed to win,
yeah,
that's double the egg on the face of the admin, right?
Yeah, it is. It's just kind of hard to pinpoint where those wins are going to come from. And, we talk about it from the conference perspective, and understandably so. We're talking about the best league in college football in the SEC. But I think that Penn State game early in the season at Jordan-Hare, I think you'll get a pretty good indication after maybe the events of what goes down in that one after we saw Penn State get that close win. Last year, the win over Auburn, I think if you're an Auburn fan, you came out of that one in Happy Valley thinking, you know what? We lost the game, but we were right there, had a great shot to win. This is year 1 of a new head coach. There were some positives to take from it. This time around, anything other than a W to cap that 2-game set, and the Wolves are going to be out.
Moving on here on this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast, going to touch on the latest in recruiting for Alabama football. Travis, you and I don't often discuss the recruiting front here on Talkin Tide, but since you and I last sat down for a Talkin Tide episode, a flurry of commitments for the Crimson Tide, 6 of them, as a matter of fact, for the 2023 class. Another one, Perry Thompson, for the 2024 class. So you count him, it's 7 altogether here in the last couple weeks. And Alabama's jumped just with that flurry. Alabama's jumped in national rankings from the late 20s to, I think, 17 or 18, maybe, depending on what service you're looking at. For a while there, I think maybe some Alabama fans that followed recruiting, Travis, were pushing a little bit of a panic button, maybe related to NIL, with Alabama sitting outside the top 25, not familiar territory for Nick Saban's recruiting efforts for sure. But as we know, Travis, you and I covered recruiting back before it was fashionable to cover
when it was
recruiting.
In print all the time, when all
right.
You had was print recruiting.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And I think that's the takeaway from these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and you go through the camp season. That's always a big part of the process from an evaluation standpoint for Alabama. And you look at a couple of the commitments that Alabama's picked up just of late. A guy like Brayson Hubbard, the athlete prospect from South Mississippi down at Ocean Springs High School, is a guy no one was talking about. He goes to Alabama camp, lights it up, gets an offer, was headed to play baseball at Southern Miss and more of a high school quarterback, but Alabama sees him as a safety. So it just shows you Alabama still continues to do its diligence in terms of the evaluation process and how much the month of June is a big part of that. But, they've done some nice things at the junior college level. You talk about some maybe retro recruiting. How much do you hear about junior college guys these days? And Alabama has gone out to get arguably the top 2 junior college prospects for the 2023 cycle, and Malik Benson, the outstanding wide receiver from Hutchinson Community College, and then also Justin Jefferson, the linebacker from Pearl River Community College over in Mississippi. So little JC recruiting, Chase. We don't hear as much about that these days with the portal.
Is the portal killing JUCO recruiting?
I think it's killing high school. I think it's killing JCs. I think what's also been interesting these last few years for sure is COVID and how that interrupted the evaluation process. And, I think there are probably some kids that benefited, believe it or not, from COVID, and that maybe they weren't as evaluated as thoroughly as they had been previously. So some offers were made to some players, some prospects that if they had gone through the typical process, maybe they don't get those offers.
Right.
Then there were some kids undoubtedly overlooked, and maybe a couple of these kids went the junior college route because that's essentially all they had between COVID, the extra year, the portal, and now you're seeing the other side of that with a couple of these guys showing up in the 2023 cycle. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it is interesting that Nick Saban's gone to the JUCO ranks for a couple of guys. Benson, I think, is the number one wide receiver recruit in the JUCO ranks nationally. So potentially a really big pickup there for the Crimson Tide. Tony Mitchell, the cornerback out of Thompson High School, a really highly recruited guy as well, 6'2". So long and lanky. That's the way. That's what they're looking for at that position now, Travis. If I don't think the 5'10" corner is a dinosaur just yet, but that position's getting longer and leaner.
It is, and then you also like the potential for some guys to play safety if they need to, right? 6'2". Those are guys that you can sort of project at every spot in the secondary with the way Alabama uses guys between corner and safety and star and money in those positions. So Mitchell looks like as a 5-star, he's certainly got that sort of versatility and a lot of versatility throughout the class. I think, you said it earlier. I think some Alabama fans have been a little anxious here in the last month or so, but I think even in the coming days and weeks with the camps behind and visits behind in the month of June, you're going to continue to see dominoes fall at a pretty good pace.
All right, one final note on the recruiting front, subtraction for the Crimson Tide signing class. Elliott Washington, 4-star safety, has flipped, had been an Alabama commitment. He, for the moment anyway, has changed his commitment to Penn State. So,
yeah, that's not going to change, I don't think. From what I understand, he'll probably be a Nittany Lion, even though he's a legacy, with his father.
Basketball.
Yeah, that's right.
Doubt. All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. Moving on, we're going to thank a couple sponsors here really quickly. Then we got some interesting notes for you on the back end of the podcast. First, though, we're going to tell you all about North River Dental Associates and Dr. Jack Smalley, that great staff of dental hygienists he's got conveniently located at 1100 Fairfax Park, right off of Watermelon Road for all your dental needs, your family's dental needs, dentures, pediatric dentistry, laser dentistry, cosmetic dentistry, porcelain veneers. They do it all at North River Dental Associates. Also doing teeth whitening services. That's always popular. Botox and Juvederm treatments as well. They're great with dealing with the insurance folks. And on a routine cleaning, you're going to be in and out of there typically in under an hour. My routine cleaning, Travis, is upcoming toward the end of next week. So I'll have a full report the next time we podcast from Dr. Jack's outstanding facility. The phone number, if you want to schedule an appointment, 752-3506, or visit northriverdentist.com. It's North River Dental Associates.
I'm going to tell you about Peter Brook Chocolatier right out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. We were talking about camp season. It's still camp season at Peter Brook Chocolatier. That's right, 205-752-0211. We've had heat. We've had storms of late. Hey, one thing you can count on for those youngins of yours is the indoor AC and just a tremendous amount of fun at the Peter Brook Chocolatier camps ongoing through the month of July. 205-752. Give them a call. They'll get you set up. Still booking up camps through the month of July. And also, you know what else July is at Peter Brook Chocolatier? It's Gelato July. So every Wednesday in the month of July, you just go into Peter Brook Chocolatier, you go over to that gelato case, you pick out a flavor, and you say, I would like my free scoop of gelato on Wednesdays only in the month of July. That's right. Free scoop of gelato on Wednesdays in July, a tradition unlike any other, right there at Peter Brook Chocolatier.
Call it gelato.
Yeah,
There you go.
I like that.
There you go.
Yes.
All right, finally going to tell you all about DraftKings. That would be our corporate sponsor. The action never ends at the DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer, with tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports. You can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Right now, download that DraftKings Sportsbook app. As a new customer, you'll get a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. That's right, make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. So there you have it at the DraftKings Sportsbook. Download it. Use the promo code TPPN. That's the Pigskin Podcast Network acronym. You see, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you see that logo right there. Make your first deposit. Get that risk-free bet up to $1,000 with promo code TPPN only at the DraftKings Sportsbook. And Travis here, as we close things out in the final minutes of the Talkin Tide podcast, figured we'd branch out college football wise, college sports wise, and talk about that Big Ten expansion. That also has come down since you and I last convened here on Talkin Tide. Southern Cal, UCLA off to the Big Ten, beginning a year ahead of Texas and OU's entry into the SEC 2024. And by the way, I'm still not convinced that Texas and OU won't figure out a way to launch in 2024 as well. But officially, that's in 25. But the Big Ten, Travis, starting in 24, adding a couple from the West Coast.
Very interesting. Not exactly geographical fits, I would say, but this is where we're at. I mean, you kind of figured this is where we were headed after the news of Oklahoma and Texas jumping from the Big 12 to the SEC. So everybody's trying to brand up at this point, and kind of figured that the two conferences that would stand above the rest would be the SEC and the Big Ten. Whatever happened to that alliance, though? Remember we were going to have this alliance? Yeah, Yeah. We're going to have our alliance. You guys can have your alliance.
Yeah.
So
that was all about like academic interests. Remember, academic.
Sure. Oh man, this is where we're headed, and it brings about that gnashing of teeth, and that, it's that time of year on message boards and radio and podcasts. I'm just about at my wit's end with college athletics, between all of this expansion and realignment, NIL, transfer portal. Everybody, Chase, has just about had it until September 3rd.
Yeah. They forget about all the troubles.
Yeah, it's funny. It just goes away,
What about those cross-country flights from L.A. to Maryland, Travis?
Hey, tell it to the University of Hawaii, all right? Tell it to the University of Hawaii.
Yeah.
I got a kid back out there at UH, and UH, just to go from Honolulu to California to L.A. is a 5-hour flight. So cry Hawaii a river, everybody else. No, but it's going to be logistically amazing to sort of watch and see how they figure all this out. I guess they're going to eventually have so many teams within the conference until it gets to a championship scenario. They're probably not going to ask schools from the West Coast that are in that league to come all the way to Rutgers or Penn State. They'll kind of just stay in their region. And then when they finally do have their league championships in the different sports, that's when they'll have to come together for that once. But no, all that stuff's going right out the window, man. I guess we're just about to the point where, how professional teams have their own jumbo jets that the teams travel in. Maybe the money's going to get to the point where maybe we're going to have that in collegiate athletics, Alabama has its own 737, a couple of them to put teams on. Who the hell knows?
What about Notre Dame? What's their move right here? It
doesn't sound like much, does it?
Well,
it's just going to have to be still.
All they got to do is
we're
pick up
still
the
not
phone.
To that point where Notre Dame probably feels like they have to jump. And so it's just going to have to be such a one-sided deal that favors Notre Dame for them to still do it. It sounds like at this point. And look, the ACC may need to pimp itself out to Notre Dame more than ever without Notre Dame fully committing to that league. We'll see.
Right.
But no, Notre Dame and the Big Ten makes the most sense, obviously. But right now, it doesn't sound like the Irish is all that motivated to make the move.
The ACC struck that long-term TV deal, rights deal with their schools. I think they're locked in till the mid-2030s, right? 2036 maybe is the end of that TV rights deal in the ACC, Travis, which does a couple of I mean, they did it for stability, and they got it, and that's great. You lock everybody in. But at the same time, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, isn't that deal going to look a little stale compared to what the Big Ten and the SEC?
If they lose Carolina and Clemson and say Florida State and some of their top brands to other leagues, I would say it might look good with what's left. Although I wonder if there's something in those contracts. Okay, if you lose these schools or this many schools to realignment or to other leagues, does that void the commitment from, say, ESPN to the ACC? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Based upon losing teams. I mean, if you're ESPN and you got that kind of dough into that league through 2030 something, and you're sitting there with, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Wake, what type of value does that contract have to you? All right. Is there ability to renegotiate that? ESPN's going to end up being the big winner because there's still going to be content, and they may end up being able to buy it for even cheaper, where some instances are concerned, than they already pay for it. They're going to pay more, no doubt, for the SEC. They're going to pay more for the Big Ten. There's no question about that. But whatever's left of the Big 12 and the ACC and the Pac-12, and you're still going to have group of fives, it's going to be all ESPN all the time.
I want to know what those exit fees would be for an ACC team to bail on a rights deal that goes another 12 years. I mean, good Lord. The rights fees for Texas and OU to come to the SEC, they only had to buy, I think, 2 years worth of TV rights, and that was $70, $80 million a piece to get out of. What's the cost going to be to get out of the ACC?
Because of the length of the deal, it's a great question.
Yeah, it's a wild scene. We haven't seen college football this wild and crazy ever, Travis, in so many ways, between alignment, the portal, NIL, conferences, the playoff expansion. I mean, everywhere you turn, the tectonic plates are shifting rapidly.
And you knew it was coming again, going back to OU Texas, which was essentially almost exactly a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it sure was.
Wasn't it SEC Media Days, really, when that broke? It was.
What I remember about that was, I don't know if it was the week of Media Days or not. Maybe it was. But what I remember was the news that A&M and OU wanted to leave the Big 12 broke on a Monday. And then there was a little bit of news. The story advanced Tuesday. It advanced Wednesday. It advanced a little bit more on Thursday. And then on Friday, it was done.
Right.
And if you looked at the progression from Monday to Friday, it was obvious that the power brokers had planned this out to be over and done with in a 5-day stretch.
Yeah.
And they got it done.
It doesn't sound all that different, maybe with SC and UCLA. To the Big Ten.
All right, before we get out of here on the Talkin Tide podcast, Travis, got to tip our hat to the recently departed Tony Sirico, who, of course, played Paulie on The Sopranos, a series near and dear to both you and I. Certainly one of my favorite characters, maybe my favorite in terms of regular characters. Some of these characters were in and out on The Sopranos, one season or a piece of a season. But in terms of the ones that were staples from beginning to end, he was hard to beat as Paulie.
No, absolutely. I mean, you can pick any type of scene you want over those 7 seasons that we had of The Sopranos. And Pine Barrens is the one episode you go back to because it's essentially Paulie and Christopher Moltisanti,
Yeah.
Michael Imperioli, and they were tremendous together. Those two guys were just out of this world great. But yeah, again, any number of scenes you could choose from that series with Mr. Sirico. And from what you understand and what you learn, if you do some digging and some reading, and Tony Sirico was a real deal.
Yes.
This wasn't a
He
guy
had
that was
some
classically
history.
trained
Yeah.
as an actor and just knocked it out of the park.
Right.
That was Tony Sirico. A lot of what you saw with Paulie.
He was hired for what they call authenticity. That's what he brought.
Yes, he did. He absolutely did.
The Pine Barrens episode was fantastic for sure. Maybe
guy killed 16 Czechoslovakians. He's an interior decorator.
What?
And Chrissy says, his house looked like shit.
Yeah. Oh, that was fantastic for sure. I think maybe aside from that, what stood out for me was the sit down with Feach LaManna.
You love that.
I love Paulie and Feach going at it.
Feach as a villain in general on that show was underrated because Ralphie and Richie were so tremendous. Veach was great. That was a great scene. That same episode, though, was maybe my personal favorite scene when he goes to confront the lawn care guys.
The nephew. Yeah. Feature's nephew.
The one tells him to go F himself. He goes around to the back of the truck, grabs a shovel, and next thing you know,
his hands up. Okay, I got you.
Next thing you see is Paulie loading up that lawnmower in the back of his caddy.
Yep. We loved him, no doubt.
No doubt about it. I mean, James Caan passes away here in the last week. Ray Liotta passes away here in the last month or so. Been a tough stretch, man, for the genre. And
no doubt.
James Caan, tremendous too. I mean, Sonny Corleone, Brian Piccolo, and Brian's song. Go on and on. Hell, even Elf. It's just a shame.
It is. I was a James Caan guy as well. I thought he was outstanding. One of the more obscure mafia movies, Travis, The Cooler, one of my favorites among those that aren't particularly well known. Pretty star-studded though. James Caan in that one, Alec Baldwin, Ron Livingston, who of course played Peter in Office Space, was in that movie and did an outstanding job. William H. Macy was in that film, and James Caan was vicious. No other word to describe it in that one.
Yeah, he wasn't exactly a teddy bear as Sonny Corleone either.
He was shooting craps across the table from what they used to call a tourist gambler. The mafia guys didn't like the tourists coming in, and the tourists opened his mouth one too many times today, we'll say. Travis.
Jimmy. Oh, gosh. Something else.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast for Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com. I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News and Crimson Cover Television. Be sure to join us next time right here on Talkin Tide.